that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and we're nearing the end with Dust of Dreams, Book 3, Book 4, Thoughts. But with that goes just my thoughts on the entire book. I feel that this book is a bit hard to judge because, Stephen Erickson made a complete thing here. At the same time, it's also very clearly set up for the crippled god. So much so, I said this before, there's a prologue for this book, but there's no epilogue. And the crippled god doesn't have a prologue, but it has an epilogue. These are books that should have been one, that were split into two. This book was also probably the darkest, which is hard to top, considering the series has had it throughout. It's the most dour, the most unhappy. I'd say, most of the series is probably 70% joke, 70% seriousness, 30% humor. I'd say this book is about 90% seriousness, 10% humor. A lot of new characters, and it's not a criticism, but I can see why a lot of people would find it hard to get invested when you're 9 books in and you're still getting introduced to new characters, new things that you're supposed to care about. It's hard to care that much moving that far in. Give me a second. But, it's just, for me, this is the weakest book in the entire 10. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's still phenomenal. It's still better than... It's still one of the best things, writing-wise, that I've ever read. I just think, in terms of everything I've read within this Malazan universe, whether that be from Stephen Erickson or Esselmont, I always like engaging with these stories. I always like immersing myself, paying attention, and I always miss stuff. I'm just one guy. I'm not doing like a podcast, like 10 Very Big Books podcast, where if I don't get it, I got somebody else who can kind of steer me in the right direction, and I don't have that. I just have me. I have people I can text, but I don't know. There's something about it that for me makes it the weakest. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It's still phenomenal. It's just the weakest of what I've read so far out of all of them. But again, half of this is set up for what's to come. I can't judge it by its own merits. It is kind of a companion piece attached to the next novel I'll review. So, that being said, the new characters we got, at first I was, really, really hard to get invested in this. I love immersing myself and reading and taking all the notes I can, but here I really struggled. I really had to force myself, like it felt like in certain sections, like a school textbook, like I was forcing myself to retain information. And it started to feel like work a little bit, I guess all of it did, back in the day, but it was so exciting and so new, but I feel like I understand this world well enough. Sure, this story gave me some new revelations and things, but at the end of the day, like, and I get it, that the whole mindset has to be like, you are not in it for the destination, you are in it for the journey. But I've invested a significant amount of time into this, and I just, and I understand it all matters, and I know that, like, some of this stuff, will be addressed in the next book. It'll be a big deal. It'll be a crescendo event. Blah, 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 blah. It's hard when you get introduced to new characters this late in the game. Again, by the end of it, I pretty much liked all the new ones, and we get some good stuff with some of the ones we already know. So, that being said, I'm super curious, excited, and a bit melancholy about the fact that I will have finished that up next. After that, I'll have finished at least the original 10 Malazan Book of the Fallen. And of course I got Blood and Bone and A Sail by Esselmont, and I got the prequel stuff, and then God Is Not Willing. But I finally finished it, and it's weird to say that, to feel that, But overall, do I recommend this book? I mean, listen, what else can I keep saying? It's the same thing with when I review any long series. Like, if you're this far in, if you have one more book left, of course you're going to read this one, and of course you're going to finish it. I'm not going to say, oh, no, not worth it, just skip it, or just stop here. Like, no, you invested this time, stick it out, finish it. You owe it to yourself, If anything else, if nothing else, you owe it to yourself to conclude it, So, I'll just say that I think it's the weakest of the 10, personally, but that doesn't make it bad. It's still better than a good number of things that I've read. So, the worst of Erickson is still an A in class, It just, maybe it doesn't have the plus like the other ones have. And, maybe on a reread I'd feel different. And, I know this actually pays off a lot of things set up in Memories of Ice. And you're like, whoa. But at the same time, it's like, is it a little bit too little too late? Like, do I really give a shite anymore? Like, it's been so many books, and some of these things happen, and I'm supposed to just retain and remember all this stuff? Like, from, for other people, I don't know how they managed it, because that was, like, literally years ago for them. For me, it's just, like, a couple months. For you, it was years ago, If I can't retain it, how is somebody from, a year ago supposed to retain it? But I guess that's part of the thing, right, is the rereads and rereading and experiencing it and understanding it with the full context and appreciating a little more finer details the next time you go through it. But I can't, I will not under any circumstances go through these books again unless I get that final book, prequel-wise, by Stephen Erickson, and the next two books in the sequel that he's writing. If I get that in the future, then I'll do an entire reread of the entire series. And I'll do it in chronological order, because I usually like to do that, but I was told firmly not to do that here. So if I can get those, then I'll definitely do a reread of everything. And then everything will be probably much more clear. I'm like, oh my god, it's amazing, perfect, amazing. I mean, I already think it's amazing, but I'll probably like it even more. This is an ADHD brain sputtering to basically say, like, I wasn't as satisfied with this one as I have been with other ones. I especially, like, and I know Toll the Hounds is a really conflicting book for people, but I loved Toll the Hounds. And maybe I didn't sound like it in my reviews, I don't really remember. But I really did enjoy Toll the Hounds. It's one of my favorites of the whole series. And, yeah, I mean, Dust to Dreams, it is necessary, it is essential, it is hard to read at times, but that is par for the course of Malazan. So you just power through. And I know that Erickson will deliver with The Crippled God when we get there. But that's for next time. That's pretty much it for non-spoilers. I know it's kind of vague. Plot things, what kind of really... I mean, we got the Kachane Shamel. We're dealing with them. We got them coming back. We got Tavor, Quick Ben, Fiddler, all of our Malazan Bone Hunter buddies back. Very small cameos of certain other people. If they're not in the dramatic persona, it doesn't mean they're not necessarily in the book, so I can't say anything more than that. But by and large, Stultius Ruin comes back. Talk. I won't explain anything other than, yeah, you'll see. You'll see. There is conflicting things going on with, everything's converging on this location that I kind of vaguely discussed in the last book, but everything's kind of converging there. And the convergence leads to a massacre. And things aren't looking pretty. And that's kind of where it ends. And of course, we'll see the conclusion to everything in the next book. But that's pretty much it for non-spoiler. I'm sorry I'm being vague. I don't know how else to give that, other than what I talked about last time and here. Like, that's about that. So, yeah, I recommend it. Sorry it took forever to just say that, but yeah, it's worth your time. I'm gonna get into spoilers now if you don't want that. If you haven't read this second half yet, then don't watch this. Otherwise, you've been warned. So, we have book 3, Only the Dust Will Dance. The epigraph for this was actually really great. I don't have anything specific of like knowledge to gain from that or to give to you, other than I really enjoyed it. The scene between Talk and Tool. It did move me to tears. I loved Tool every time he showed up, and I loved Talk. And then they killed him the first time round, and then they bring him back, and they kill him again. Like, really kill him. And then we get this version of him dead, but still him. And then scene with Tool. And we learn that Talk is the lock for Hood's gate, which is why people have been dying, I guess. I think is what I'm meant to get from that. And then we meet this new character, Olar Thil, who forces Talk. We learn this after the fact, but basically Talk is being a dick to Tool. And basically makes, because they had one of the strongest bonds, one of the most platonic bonds in fiction that I've ever read. Amazing chemistry that's not romantic, but this friendship. And Talk is forced to treat his friend a certain way, to the point where Tool goes from utter friendship and devotion to I hate you. And I can't do the scene justice, you have to read it. But it hurt. It was painful, and it wasn't even a death or something tragic happening, which happens. It was the worst part of the book for me. Not because it was written poorly or anything, but because it just hurt to read. So there is that. So Burn Sleep, Animander Rake's mother is apparently awake, and she wants vengeance. Which, how do you stop that? How is the Cripple God even a problem in the next book? Because how is there anything bigger than life itself being a threat? You gotta remember, at least as far as we're aware, maybe the prequel series will delve into this and actually show something completely different. But as far as the current understanding is, unless I don't understand it correctly, which is very possible, Mother Dark is kind of, in some way, shape, or form, the origins of all life as we currently know it in Malazan, I think. I could be extremely wrong. But anyway, she's awake, wants vengeance. How do you fight life itself when it wants vengeance against you? And then Hayton, brutality. We get this scene where another rape. We have a lot of those in this series, but there was a certain way about this one that was particularly more upsetting than the rest. In the way that it kind of just made her immobile, made her feel completely powerless. It's rough. I don't really feel like talking about it any further than that. Those who know what I'm talking about. Hobbled. Yeah, just as I said, very dark book. After that, we have Mail and the Old Guard Gods. It's fun to see Mail/Bug interact with these characters, and to see Bug give more of the God persona that we just got to, that we got first introduced to at the end of Midnight Tides, to see him really to see that God be more of a factor here, and I hope in the prequel stuff is more prominent in some way, shape, or form. there's this interesting concept brought up about how we create the gods, so therefore we can also destroy them, which I thought was interesting for this series. Talk and Sitak have this scene together, which I really enjoyed, and there's a certain part where they talk about how to live is to wage war. You might have peace for a while, but there's always something, that kind of like gears us toward fighting one another. And, because when we're too peaceful, we kind of, strive for revolution or some things or another. And, no matter what, there's always a need for more violence, seemingly, with us. This is confusing, but to carry him as throne, there was apparently ghosts of Veed and Featherwitch, which were aspects of him, I think. I don't know, very confusing. But by the end of the scene, it's just Ikram. And he goes to take his throne, whatever that fully entails. And then the big last thing of book 3 that I decided to write down, there's a lot that happens in all of these, and I'm not writing down every little thing, or we would be here for eternity. Again, if you want more in-depth, heavily, involved, go watch 10 Very Big Books podcast. They will do that for you. I see something of particular interest to me, and I write it down, or something I think will be a significant plot significance later, I try to write it down. That's as far as my note-taking goes. Important plot point, fun character moment that I enjoyed. They're not maybe necessarily fun, but a character moment that I resonated with, or whatever little lore tidbit or whatever I find personally interesting, I write down. So of course it's not a exactly comprehensive guide through of these books. I'm just giving you, my perspective, how limited I can with the time I have by myself, So, yeah. But yeah, Draconis is back. Now, again, if you've been reading the Esselmont books, Orb Scepter Throne is this character named Morn, who I feel like is heavily, heavily, heavily implied to be Draconis, and if you kind of put that together, then you would have already kind of known that Draconis was walking around doing stuff. But as far as this book goes, this is perfect confirmation that he is in fact around and back. Then we move on to book 4, The Path Forever Walked, and interestingly as well with this, is the first time in any of these Malazan books so far that the 4th book is not titled the same thing as the novel, because this has always been the case in every book prior, except for this one, which is an interesting departure. Oof. So Siltrus Ruin has this amazing scene with Radaleil, whatever his name is, the kid that he took at the first half of the book that we talked about last week. But the quote was, "When desperation becomes a way of life, behind the assault hides a fragile person." So he was talking with him about, different, aggression first, what that says about a person, or being more defensive, and it was just a really interesting conversation to me personally. Also, just confirming for absolute factor for myself and for you, Siltrus Ruin is a Tistiandi, which I always assume, but I just wanted to verify. He's just albino for some reason, and I don't know if the books have ever really dived into why. He just is. I think Siltrus is really interesting. He's really complex because in the last book, there's a lot of things not last book, but in book 7, Reaper's Gale, there's a lot of things I admired about the guy. But at the same time, then, you have the ending of the book. So it's like, but here you see, like, at least in his mind, and that's part of the thing, right, with Malazan in general, in his mind, he's not trying to be a villain. There was a purpose necessary for what he was doing, and he doesn't, he's not a mustache twirling evil mastermind. Like, he is genuinely is not trying to be a villain or an antagonist to anyone. Like, he's just like, this is what needed to happen, So I just think that's interesting. We do get to see Mappo and Gruntle again. They're not in their dramatic personas because they're not big characters in the book, but they are here, and they're playing a small role, but they're in a very low percentage of this book. Another fun quote that I decided to write down: "Perfect hero is one whose heroism is never seen." And this again is a recurring theme throughout all of these books, which is the whole idea of being unwitnessed, about being good despite not getting recognition for it, not being seen. You know, and again, it's very much a biblical principle of, you know, like, don't just give to the poor in front of your friends and be like, oh, look how charitable I am. Like, the deed matters because you did it inherently because of the worth of it being good in and of itself, not because you wanted to be praised for it or anything. You know, trying to win brownie points with God, not trying to win brownie points with your friends. You give money or food to the homeless because it's inherently a good thing to do, a right thing, a moral thing. Who cares if you never get a clap on the back for it? And that's part of the thing that's been throughout this whole series, but it's reiterated again here with that. And the best heroes or heroism is those heroes who are never seen, who go unwitnessed. So I just liked a good reaffirming of that whole idea. Turrent and Elil argue over the Amas. That was also a fun conversation because she apparently also is the one who kind of I mean, it was not just her, there was different bonecasters, but she was kind of the focal one that got them to start initially to wage war. And she's still using them now, and Turrent's like, you shouldn't be doing that. We have Relata, this Barghast, who join up with Draconis and Ubila Pung, the Tobalakai. I do it right now. I know in the past, very funny of me. You can all make fun of me. I know you probably did in the comics. I used to say for Karsa Orlong, I used to call him the Bloki because I'm dumb, but it is Tobalakai. I understand that now. But yeah, they're off to go to Jakaruku, which I don't know. If that's going to become a thing in the next book, or if that's just going to be shipped off to Esselmont, because I'm pretty sure Blood and Bone takes place in Jakaruku, but I guess we'll see. Also, Stormy and Gessler are the sword and shield for the Kachane Shamel, which is really interesting. That's like the big thing here. Along with the Destrian still being Goliath, the lady we met at the beginning of this book. But again, this is part of the thing I'm saying. Like, there was setup for this, like back during Memories of Ice. And I'm trying to reread, you'd be like, oh my god, that's so crazy. But it's like, on the one hand, I admire, and I can't even comprehend the levels of intellect and creativity that took Steven Erikson to be able to take something that early, set it up there, and maybe he'd even mean it like that, just kind of flow organically into that later. But having something like that from back when to matter all the way here is insane to make that big thing. But at the same time, when you're going through this the first time, maybe on a reread this is perfect, and maybe this is one of those things that Erikson did for those rereaders, not for those initially reading a story. But it is so hard when you've gone through several thousand pages to, oh right, back during Memories of Ice, this one thing, right, so I should give a shit now? Like, it's sometimes it's too little too late, at least on an initial viewing. And for me, it's like, cool? Do I give a shit? Not really. You know? Like, I don't hate it or anything. It's not like a bad plot point. It's actually incredibly awesome. But I don't really care. But again, on a reread, I might appreciate it more. But, you know, because I already know where everything's going. And I understand that's part of the thing. Again, that is the thing. The journey, not the destination. You can't be looking for that in these Malazan books. That's part of the thing you just have to deal with. But it's like it happened. I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought about it some more. Like, oh, okay. But I don't really care. Because this is what I'm talking about, like, with pacing. There's no wrong pacing. There's no way to do it wrong because this is exactly how Steven Erikson wanted it to be done. But my thing is that for an organic viewing experience, if you want people to retain information for one thing and to be extra excited for certain tidbits of information that are provided throughout the story, there are ways to do that really organically to really make it pop and snap. And I feel like because you did that so early and didn't have a payoff to books later, and it's not like, again, Steven Erikson is also a very subtle guy. It's very much like I said, like Better Call Saul way back when I made that comparison. There's no like big crescendo like, oh, point science. Did you not notice that? Like, it's rather subdued, some of these things that are revealed. You know, it's a big deal. And I don't know, it's hard to, and there's so many characters and so many plot lines and so many things, it's hard to give a shit equally about all of them. And I apologize for the cussing. Just it's hard to give a damn about every single plot point as you continue to go through. And it's just a thing of like, I mean, cool, but like, I it's so long since Memories of Ice, like it doesn't impact me as hard, you know. But there's props. Again, it is, I think, expertly handled. It's the best way you could possibly handle that. Um, it's just for me too little, too late. At least on a first read through, you know, for me to be like, this is the best thing ever. Oh my god! But you know, that's just me. Um, moving on. All right, now we get to like the end of the book where we have the big giant crescendo fight of all proportions, and I mean the stupidest, the so dumb thing like dew brain, laser brain, lizard brain. I have a reason for saying that. Thing you could ever imagine, which is a bunch of dinosaurs. I mean, we already had the dinosaurs with the sword arms, which is absurd enough, but now they got lightning guns and swords and all that stuff and spaceships, kind of all in this, which is insane and stupid but awesome and absolutely fits this world. So I can't even really hate on it. But yeah, crazy stuff. And it's also just crazy to think about how like most people in this setting are like very medieval in terms of their technology. But then you have these guys going. It's crazy. We do have a death in here. I'm not particularly sad about it because, to be honest, I don't really care about this character. And again, this is a problem of just having so many characters, or it's actually a problem with me and I just don't have enough compassion or love for my fellow man. That's probably it. But we do lose, and I mean, I was like, oh, because like I recognize the name, see him a lot, but I also didn't feel an emotional pain to it like I did with Tool and Talk arguing. That hurt me. This was just like, oh no, okay, which is that Kneb dies, unfortunately. Very sad. Also, Bottle does this thing with these Whipples where he attacks the Change Mel, like a bunch of them all at once, and that was a super cool scene as well. I don't really talk about Bottle too much, but out of all the like thousands of bajillion characters we have, he's one that is grown on me. I didn't talk about him too much in the Bone Hunters videos, I don't think, because he just didn't leave that much of an impression on me. I knew he was gonna matter with the way things were being written. He was gonna matter for later stories, but I didn't personally feel invested in him like at all. But here, he did some awesome stuff, I have to say. And then there's also this actually really sad scene, even though I don't give a damn about this person, but for some reason it resonated. Ben's like doing these crazy like electric things, like doing crazy stuff, okay? And I forget if it was Fiddler or Bottle, or was it? I forget who it was that was standing. I apologize. No, never mind. Sorry, I do remember. Hedge. Hedge was gonna get hit by one of the straying bolts. Hedge has been brought back to life. I mean, this is now his second chance at life, you know. He already died. But because of how much Sunset, this character, looked up to him, sacrifices themselves for Hedge. And it was just a really great little scene there. And the last thing I want to mention is Ikram showing up to this whole thing in a floating sky city ready for battle. That was just... It couldn't be live action. It's just not possible. The only way this is ever getting adapted is in a animated medium. Like it's too expensive to do it any other way. I'm sorry. It just will not conceivably, logistically ever happen. But it was so cool. But yeah, the story just kind of ends. You don't really get true resolution here. Because, you know, one thing, and Steven Erikson warned me at the beginning of the book, but this is something he tries to never do. Even if he has an overarching plot, like with the Malazan Book of the Fallen, he tries to always give each book a conclusive ending. But as I said, books 9 and 10 were always meant to be a single novel. But he wasn't allowed to do that. So it doesn't end like abruptly. Like it does have an ending, but it doesn't feel fulfilling of an ending. Because it was never meant to be the ending. But there is an ending. I'm not saying like just like, oh, cuts off mid-sentence or anything. It does end. But it doesn't feel like an end like the other books did. Because it's just going to continue right off with Cripple God. There is no prologue to Cripple God. It just starts at chapter 1, go. So it's very much that. So, and again, I don't feel like I can fully appreciate Dusty Dreams until I finish the Cripple God. But that's been much from you guys. Up next, we finish Malazan, Book of the Fallen, with the Cripple God. Till then, don't pass through Hood's Gate before we finish these reviews, okay? Thank you.